Hi guys, Dan here from Canada Abroad, and thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be discussing labor market impact assessments. Now, we find that we get the question a lot of what is a labor market impact assessment? And that's because usually the number one question that we get is, how can I work in Canada? And the answer to that question typically is you first need a job offer from a Canadian employer, unless you're eligible for the IEC program. And if you get that job offer, in most cases, the employer is going to need to do what's called a labor market impact assessment before you can apply for your work permit. Now, a labor market impact assessment in simplified form is basically an approval from the Canadian government for the employer to bring in a foreign national to fill a position in Canada. Now, typically in most scenarios with a labor market impact assessment, the employer is going to have to prove that they advertise the position in Canada on at least 3 different public platforms, so basically 3 different job search sites, that they ran the advertisement for a minimum of 4 weeks, and they need to keep it going through the labor market impact assessment process. And what they need to do basically is review all of the applicants that apply to that job post, and anyone who meets the basically skills, education requirements of the job post, they would need to interview them. And if a Canadian citizen or permanent resident applied to the job who was suitable to fill the position, then they would be expected to hire that individual. So in order to get a labor market impact assessment approved, they have to basically show that they didn't receive an application from a Canadian citizen or permanent resident that could have filled this position. Because this process is basically to protect the jobs of Canadians and to only allow the foreign workers in when there's no Canadian that was readily available to fill the position. Now, some jobs may not require labor market impact assessments. They might be exempt. So if you want to see the full list of jobs that are exempt from requiring a labor market impact assessment, you can just click the link below in the description of this video, and it'll take you to a list of those different occupations. Some jobs also might be exempt from a work permit, and that's a little bit different from being exempt from the labor market impact assessment, because you might be going over on something that's called a visitor record. So you're going in on visitor status for an extended period of time because the job that you're doing doesn't require a work permit. So if you also want to find out what jobs don't need the work permit, you can click the description below this video and it will take you through to that full list. Now, with the labor market impact assessment process, there are certain documents the employer is going to have to give. So they really need to be aware of what's involved with this process, because if they want to give you a job offer, we've seen sometimes that once they find out what documents they need to give, they're not quite ready to give all of those documents to the government. So typically they have to show that they haven't violated any employer-employee rights before, so they're an employer in good standing. They would need to do what's called a transition plan in most positions. Some of the very higher up positions like executive or directorships, they might not have to do this, but a transition plan basically outlines how you as a foreign national and foreign worker, bringing you in is going to assist the Canadian worker. So are you going to transfer skills and knowledge to the people that you work with? They're going to have to outline how this is going to be a benefit for them. They need to prove that their business is operational, so business licenses, tax documents, proof of employees that they have at the moment, because they also have to justify and prove that whatever position they're offering you, it makes sense for their business type. So if you're being offered a position as a senior manager, but the company has no employees yet, they have to outline why you need to come in as a senior manager. What is the business plan? What is your position? Who are you going to be managing? So it can't just be, that a friend's got a job offer for you and they're going to go through this process. It has to be a legitimate business, and the position is legitimate to the business, so it's actually needed. The business can afford the salary that's being offered to you. Because the other thing with a labor market impact assessment is, with a position that's being offered to you, the employer has to be offering you a salary which is in line with the wage requirement of the area that you're going to be working in. So they can't be underpaying you because you're a foreign national. So sometimes that becomes a problem as well, that we've seen that the employers don't want to actually pay the foreign national that high wage. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So there's a lot of fine things that go into a labor market impact assessment, but I think the most important thing to know is if you want to work in Canada and you're trying to get a work permit, usually the first step is to get a job offer, unless, like I said, you're eligible under the IEC program for Canada. And if you're not sure what that is, then you can just click again in the description below this video and it'll take you to a link that outlines who's eligible for that IEC program that doesn't require job offers. But if you are one of the people that needs a job offer first, then typically you are going to have to get this labor market impact assessment done before you can apply for a work permit. Now, the other thing that I'll just note quickly is certain IT professions across Canada, they still need a labor market impact assessment, but the employer in some cases might be exempt from having to advertise the position, which can be really useful because a lot of the employers sometimes they find that, okay, well, if I'm going to advertise this position, I'm probably going to find a Canadian, so they don't even want to start the process. But for certain IT positions, because they know that there is a shortage across Canada, if the employer wants to give you a job offer, they still submit a labor market impact assessment application, but they don't have to do the advertising process. So if you are an IT worker, I'm going to put a link again below this video in the description, and you can click there to see if your occupation is one of the ones that's exempt from the advertising, because that might make it a little bit easier when you are looking for jobs in Canada if the employer doesn't have to go through the advertising required. Okay. And if you are an applicant who is in express entry and you want to get a labor market impact assessment to add extra points, because as we know, if you're in the express entry system and you have what we call a valid job offer, it can either give you 50 or 200 points, depending on the skill level of your position. In some cases, you are going to have a labor market impact assessment to put on your express entry profile in order to add those points. Now, if your employer is going to be applying for a labor market impact assessment, usually the application fee is $1,000 Canadian. If they are doing the labor market impact assessment just for your permanent residence, then it's free. The only time in this scenario that they would have to pay the $1,000 is if you want to use your labor market impact assessment, number one, to add the points to your express entry profile, and number two, to also apply for a work permit to allow you to get into Canada as quickly as possible. So if they want that labor market impact assessment to be for both purposes, then they have to pay the $1,000. But if they just want to do it so that you can get the extra points on your express entry profile, then there's no fee that they have to pay. So thanks so much for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you want to stay up to date with all the latest Canadian immigration news and updates.